I first started making videos on YouTube about 8 years ago now, I was mainly focused on making videos about hobby photography, making your photos look a little bit better with tweaks to lighting, composition, so that you can get the most amount of likes on Instagram or Reddit or... is Blue Sky a thing yet? I really am terrible at social media. And lately, over on my Twitch streams at twitch.tv/badgunpla, you've been sending in your photos for me to take a look at and help you make your own photos just a little bit better in the future. And that got me to thinking, I haven't done a video on hobby photography in years. So let's take a look at some photos together and figure out how to make them just a little bit better. Gotta put that for-profit scam school filmmaking degree to good use at some point. And let's start by taking a look at this photo from May with a Sword of the high-grade Gundam Calibarn. There's a lot that I like about this photo, mainly that this is an aerial shot that also uses what's called a canted or Dutch angle. See, when you have a flying kit, or whenever you have a model that is supposed to be evoking motion, if you have them up on stands, a little bit of an angle can give it just that extra sense that there's 3 dimensions here, that things are flying around, things are moving. And even in this case, you have this giant gun, the legs that are sticking up, and just adds a little bit more of that flight sort of look. So good composition, good pose, pretty good lighting as well. You can see that a lot of the detail is still left in the darker areas of the kit there, and we're not getting a lot of the shinier areas towards the top blown out, which can be very easy to do when you're dealing with a largely white model kit. But that's not the only thing I'm focusing on with this photo, you see. This is also a photo that has a lot of other things going on. I don't know what this is. I think this might be a plushie comfort, I can't really tell. Whatever this kit is up here looks really cool, and I like the glowy keyboard. The point is, we have a lot going on in the background here that has absolutely nothing to do with the photo itself. When you're taking pictures of your kits, I've been preaching this for years, remember what's going on in the background when you take your shot. Because it just becomes distracting and it makes it look like a toy. If that's what you're going after, more power to you. But if you're trying to make this photo look like a scale model robot flying through space, maybe take the model kit and put it up against the monitor and put some kind of space background on it. At least to my eye, that becomes distracting when we're looking at what is genuinely a very well posed and composed shot. Posed and composed, huh? Well, the model kit's posed, and it's posed well. And then you get the idea. This also might be one of the only times where it's appropriate to use a clear stand, and primarily because the desktop that this model is sitting on top of is also predominantly white. This is what we call in the filmmaking industry foreshadowing. Because I want to take a look at this photo from Rainwing of the Daryl Baldy. I think that's close enough. Now, of course, you can definitely crop out some of the sky that doesn't have a lot going on, and then the model kit itself would be a little more central in frame. But this is another model where we're using a clear display stand. And as you can see, it's a lot more predominant than the one that we just saw from May with a Sword. Primarily because it's against a dark background. Clear displays are a bit of a tricky thing to work with, and I generally don't recommend using them at all whenever you can avoid it. Because we think, yeah, it's a clear display, you won't even really see it whenever you're taking pictures of it. But the fact is that it is a very shiny surface. And because it's a shiny surface, it's reflecting everything else around it, making it significantly more noticeable than even a black display would be. If you have to show your display in your shots, try to have one that color matches your background so that it blends in a little bit more. Or even better, try to cover it up with your pose. Which Rainwing does eventually do. He actually sent in 2 photos here, and I think this one actually is more dynamic in general to begin with. Because not only is the kit looking at the camera directly, with that forward-facing leg, it looks like it's trying to kick me directly in the face. But that forward-facing leg is also doing something else. Notice that it's covering up the overwhelming majority of our clear stand, making it a lot less noticeable. And notice when we're not seeing the entire display that it does blend into those trees a little bit more. That's because we're dealing with some very dense foliage. And you do see kind of it shining a little bit, but that could be mistaken easily just for the kit itself if you didn't know what it was. When you're outside and shooting, especially when you're shooting in the wintertime. You want to be careful about your backgrounds, especially if your trees are part of said background. If they're not dense enough, they can be a little distracting. As you'll see now with this photo from Stell. Again, really cool photo. I really like the lower angle of the camera. The model kit is the perfect color scheme for a snow and ice based photo. That looks dynamite. What's challenging about this photo though is that your sunlight is directly behind this rightmost tree. What I would have liked to have seen here are denser trees, or no trees at all. This might be nitpicking a little bit and just be my personal preference. I do think that that would be significantly helpful though. Another thing that you could have done is actually taken this photo closer to the trees. If we zoom in a little bit in this left-hand side here, you get this effect that we call bokeh, where the out of focus background creates these circular inclusions. And that's done primarily by the branches being a little more spread out. If we were closer to the trees while keeping them out of focus and using a really, really shallow depth of field, which is to say getting really close to the kit itself and just focusing significantly on one part of that model kit, you'll get a lot more of that effect. And then all of a sudden your sparsely shown trees get a little more artsy. Now, as many of you know, I live in Austin, Texas, and I am therefore chronically allergic to snow. So let's go inside for the next few shots. And I want to start with this one from the Youngster. Now this appears to be a custom painted Zeta Gundam, and I love the color scheme. It looks so good. But we're not talking about the model kit, we're talking about the photo. And again, pose is good. The use of the bright colors against a very dark backdrop I think is very smart. And the fact that they're using a black action base makes it blend in with the background a lot easier. Unfortunately, that background appears to mainly be black construction paper. And I don't think I would notice that nearly as much if this was a lower angled shot. The lighting is very good, the composition is good, and even with the kit looking like it's trying to leap up from the position that it's in on the base, because of the higher angle shot, we get the sense that we are looking at a small toy. There's nothing wrong with using something like a poster board or even construction paper as your backdrop, but make sure when you do so that you take care of these seams as much as you can, because whenever we see these seams, we automatically know that we're just dealing with paper here. And it does make it a little less interesting. Compare that, for example, with this photo from John the Mod, which appears to also be using construction paper, but I can only see that from this little sliver right above whatever this dude is on the left. And with this little bit of detail, like, it looks more like a light inclusion than it does anything like a paper backdrop. Another thing worth looking at in this photo from John the Mod compared to the Youngster is the use of contrast. This is a very high contrast photo, and whenever you're shooting with black backdrops or just solid backdrops in general, high contrast can be a blessing to get rid of some of those inclusions, like the creases in the paper on the photo from the Youngster. So if we just boost the contrast on this, look at how much less noticeable the backdrop is now. Now this photo from Adam Dimla seems to kind of strike a balance between the last two photos. We have a high contrast shot of a really cool kit bash. This appears to be ultramarine inspired, while not going too hard on the contrast to lose detail, like we do in some places in the photo from John the Mod. I also love the extra touch of the diorama base. Now again, I know we're not talking about the kits themselves here, but that just breaks up all of the black around the ultramarine kit bash so nicely. It's not too much, it's not over the top, and that couldn't have taken more than 2 or 3 minutes to put together. That really is kind of a theme of all the photos we've been looking at so far, right? Is what the model kit is sitting on, or standing on, or attached to. Doing things creatively with your bases can make the photo so much more interesting. Imagine, if you will, I were to crop this right around the knee so that we just have the minigun and the rest of the model in the shot. Sure, that's still an interesting photo, but when we have that base, and that base is something that's also appealing to the eye, that makes the photo as a whole significantly more interesting. And you don't necessarily need to do any fancy foliage like this, or sand work, or get your hands messy with super glue. You could also use things that, again, are around your house. Take a look at this shot from Weepy Storm. I adore this photo because there's a couple ways you can go about scale model photography, right? You can try to make the thing look like a giant fighting machine, or you can embrace the fact that it's a small scale in this case, miniature for a tabletop game. I love the use of the battle mat on this photo because you can very clearly see this as part of a tabletop game. But not just any battle mat, mind you, one that color matches very nicely with the model itself. We don't just have black here, it's not just, gray concrete or, green foliage or whatever it might be. This is what appears to be a very arid battle scene. I would assume like arid grass or, some kind of savanna. And by having a color match with the base and also complement the greens and the reds that are highlighting the, I think this is a Mad Cat? It's been a long time since I've done anything MechWarrior related. It just makes the photo pop really, really well. So I want to encourage all of you watching this video, if you are taking photos of your kits, of your scale models, of your minifigures, experiment with different backgrounds. Don't feel like you just have to use something static like a poster or a piece of paper or whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff around your house, most likely, that can make your photos significantly more interesting, even if you don't have a playmat. And a playmat's really only one example. Let's take a look at this photo from Wholesome Witch, which has big Who's That Pokemon energy. I actually have no idea what this thing is, but what I love about it is that this is not just a silhouetted image, it is a very crisp silhouetted image. We have a very in focus shot that's clearly using significant use of long exposure to get these crisp lines, along with this really beautiful blue to purple color gradient. So who doesn't love bisexual lighting? I think I need to figure out a way to do pansexual lighting now. But this effect is again really just made with household objects, because what Witch did is set up a piece of paper and some tissue paper around desk lamps. That's all you need. You might have some old packing material lying around that you can wrap around a low wattage desk lamp and give these extra interesting lighting effects. Now you'll notice that this behind the scenes photo is much brighter than what we saw in the photo previously. And that's because what was being utilized in the initial shot is long exposure photography. Now this is obviously, as you can see, done by a DSLR, but you can do this on a phone camera as well. You can set your shutter speed to a significantly longer length, 1 second, 3 seconds, even 5 seconds, while simultaneously making your aperture as small as you can possibly make it. That then lights up our white backdrop, and that reflection goes right back into your camera. This again can be done with a DSLR, it can be done with a phone camera. Hell, you can do it with a webcam if you want to make things more difficult on yourself. So think about the things that are around your house and find ways to make those backdrops more interesting and make your stands a little less noticeable. And there you have it, a whirlwind tour of some of my favorite hobby photography tips. Thanks everybody in the Bad Gunpla Discord server for sending these photos in. And thanks everybody over on twitch.tv/badgunpla for suggesting that I do a video like this to kind of get back in the swing of things over on the YouTube channel. If you got something out of this video, please leave a comment down below. I do read every single one, for better or worse. And if you'd like me to do more videos like this, let me know as well. I hope to see you around on Twitch and in the Bad Gunpla Discord server, and thank you very much for watching.